Lascian Cora, before I start, I just want to formally put on the record that I'm not at all happy that the Minister for Agriculture is not present. Now, when Minister McConalogue told me that he couldn't be physically here, there are two other Ministers of State in that department, and it is just not good enough that neither of the three ministers could be available here this morning for what is an extremely urgent issue. And normally I would refuse to accept this debate this morning, but sadly, the people and the farmers in the Shannon Callows and their families do not have the luxury of waiting for the diaries to open up for either of the three ministers. And it's not good enough that they're not here, and I just want to put that on the record. Lascian Cora, I'm seeking to address a matter of the utmost urgency and something that is of significant importance for the farmers in the Shannon and Suck Callows, and that is the need to revise the existing compensation scheme for those affected by flooding over the last number of months. This issue, as we are all painfully aware, is not just a matter of financial compensation, but one that strikes at the very heart of our rural communities and their sustainability. The Shannon Callows, a region known for its rich agricultural heritage, has been devastated by the unprecedented flooding. This has resulted in a significant loss of fodder and grazing, impacting on over 300 farmers directly. The current compensation scheme, promising €325 per hectare, is a step in the right direction. However, the execution and scope of this scheme raises critical concerns. The situation on the ground is dire at present. Our farmers have lost approximately 7,000 acres each of both meadow and grazing land. This flood began on St Patrick's Day and has continued well into the summer, and has not only destroyed crops but has also forced farmers to use their silage grounds for grazing, leaving them without fodder. This crisis is not just about compensating them for the loss of fodder, it's about recognising the cascading effect of this disaster on the overall agricultural productivity and the mental well-being of our farmers and their families. And while the package being delivered is commendable, it overlooks critical aspects such as the limitation to 15 hectares and the lack of consideration of the loss of grazing lands. Our farmers didn't just lose their meadows, they lost valuable grazing time, which is crucial for their cattle, and this cannot be overlooked. Also, the delay in issuing payments is alarming. The farmers of the Shannon Callows have been grappling with one of the longest summer floods in living memory. Their resilience is commendable, but their patience and resources are wearing very thin. It was initially indicated that payments would commence in December, yet we are here now facing the possibility that these payments will not now be issued until 2024. This delay is potentially devastating for farmers who are relying on this support to sustain their livelihoods and their families. Moreover, the method of identifying affected farmers through satellite mapping, while innovative, has inadvertently excluded those along the River Suck and the Little Brosna tributaries. It's imperative that any farmer who has suffered due to flooding, whether on the Shannon itself or on the backflow of waters on the tributaries, receive support. The current count of 230 farmers affected, as highlighted by Save Our Shannon organisation, is a gross underestimation. By overlooking those affected by tributary flooding, we risk leaving many farm families in dire straits this Christmas. And as a result, I would urge the Minister for Agriculture to look again at the compensation scheme for the farmers in the Shannon Callows and ensure that they get adequate compensation, including those on the Little Brosna and the River Suck. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasca Hirlich. Deputy, I appreciate I'm not the Minister for Agriculture, or indeed a Minister for State in that department, but I do hope that the statement that I give will be of assistance to you. I'd like to begin by stating that the Government fully recognises that there has been exceptional flooding in the Shannon Callows during the late summer, which has prevented some farmers from completing their normal traditional harvesting of silage and or hay. And this has left, as you say, Deputy, affected farmers in a serious situation, requiring them to purchase fodder to maintain animal health and welfare during the winter months. And it is in that context that Minister McConalogue announced on the 7th of November 2023 a new scheme which you referenced, the Shannon Callows flood scheme, to support affected farmers in the Shannon Callows. The Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine has announced funding of 800,000 to assist farmers who have been affected by fodder loss in the Shannon Callows. This scheme will be operated from within the department, and given the urgent nature of the assistance required, it is planned that payments will commence issuing to applicants in December of this year. The expression of interest letters, which include the application form, issued on the 17th of November to approximately 230 farmers, and these farmers were identified as being impacted by fodder loss on dates between the 2nd of July and the 29th of September 2023 by the department's area monitoring system. And in returning the application and applying for the scheme, the farmer is declaring that they have lost fodder as a result of the exceptional flooding and that they have read and understand the terms and conditions of the scheme. The closing date for receipt of applications from the approximately 230 farmers is the 27th of November, and indeed as of the 22nd of November this year, applications have already been received. And I would, however, encourage these farmers, those farmers who have received an expression of interest letter, to get it returned to the direct payment section of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine as soon as possible. In addition to this new Shannon Callows flood scheme, the department also paid out approximately 56 million in funding to farmers across the country under the 2022 fodder scheme in response to the Ukraine crisis, and a further 30 million was also paid out to farmers under the 2023 fodder scheme in an advance payment in December 2022. The department anticipates paying a balancing payment for the 2023 fodder support scheme in the coming weeks, and that's likely to amount to approximately 15 to 20 million in total. Approximately 71,000 farmers were in the 2022 fodder support scheme, with approximately 67,000 of them also applying for the 2023 fodder support scheme, and these schemes have supported the production of fodder on Irish farms across the country in both 2022 and 2023. The department estimates that approximately 2,500 hectares were impacted by flooding. These 2.5 hectares are grassland, and in terms of financial support under the Shannon Callows flood scheme, the department does not differentiate whether the grassland was utilised for saving hay or silage exclusively, or was used only for grazing. Some parcels along the River Suck and the Little Brosna River are included within the figure of 2,500 hectares. In terms of the overall fodder situation within the country, the latest study by Tagish on the fodder situation shows that winter feed stocks are relatively secure and that there is surplus fodder on 75% of farms nationally. And turning to the wider issue of flooding in the Shannon region, the department is represented and participates fully in the Shannon Flood Management Working Group, which is led by the Office of Public Works. Just to finish last, the department has no direct role in the management of water levels along the Shannon waterway. However, senior officials within the department participate in the Shannon Flood Risk State Agency Coordination Working Group, and this working group was established in early 2016 by the government to enhance ongoing cooperation across all of the state agencies involved with the River Shannon.
Aristod, first of all, can I thank you for your response and acknowledge your presence here, but I think it's pitiful that none of the three ministers could explain their absence from the House this morning. Secondly, yes, the extension to grazing lands and acknowledgement of that in your reply is welcome. The difficulty is that farmers are being caught by a double whammy in terms of the loss of their fodder, the loss of the aftergrass because they've had to let stock in on some of the grazing land. And it's not necessarily the flooded lands themselves, they have had to let stock in on other grazing land as a result of that. And that isn't acknowledged in terms of the proposals that are being put here. And it isn't acknowledged in terms of all of the farmers impacted on the River Suck and the Little Brosna, some of whom have still to receive an expression of interest letter and obviously are being discriminated against. So, Minister, I would ask you to do me one thing. and that is go back to the Minister for Agriculture and at least have him do me the courtesy of responding back to 4 points. One is that we expedite the compensation process to ensure that payments are made promptly and certainly well before the end of this year. 2, that we expand the scope of the compensation scheme to include all farmers affected by flooding, regardless of whether the flooding occurred on the main river Shannon itself or its tributaries. 3, to reassess the compensation amount and the criteria, taking into account the loss of grazing land and the actual extent of the damage, which far exceeds the current estimation. And fourthly, to establish a more inclusive and consultative process with the farming community to ensure that all affected parties have their voices heard and their needs met. And I'd ask you, Minister, to ensure that the Minister for Agriculture does come back and respond to those 4 specific issues without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lass. Deputy, I've heard what you said in relation to expediting the compensation. I did say in my statement that I understand that payments will be made from that scheme by December, which is the end of this year. I will also bring your comments back around expanding the scope of the compensation scheme, that you want the compensation amount reassessed, and you want to establish a more inclusive and consultative process in the future. I also note what you said earlier in relation to recognising the cascading effect on farmers, and in relation to their well-being as well, that it's not just about the loss of fodder. And I think you mentioned as well that there's 7,000 acres each lost to the farmers, and that there are about 300 farmers, in your view, that are directly affected by this. So I will bring your contribution back today, and I will let your views known to the Department and indeed to the Ministers.
Thank you, Minister.